Incidentally, China did abolish its one-child policy in 2015 and then abolished its two-child policy in 2021. They now have a three-child policy. So what happened between 2015 and now with regard to the birth rates? Well, in 2015, the birth rate was 1.7 births per woman in China. Currently, it's 1.3 births per woman in China. So it actually has dropped since then, despite the abolition of these policies. In order for them to maintain any kind of population stability going forward, they would have had to have maintained a birth rate of about 2.1 births per woman. That 0.1 accounts for the children that pass away or women that can't or won't have children. The last time China met a birth rate of 2.1 or more was 1990. And since then, they've hovered between 1.9 and 1.3. Now, the U.S. has a birth rate that's actually below the replacement rate as well, with ours currently last year being 1.6. But we maintained above a 2.1 birth rate all the way up until 2008, whereas China's ended in 1990. So why didn't the Chinese birth rates go up when they allowed for more children? Well, as a country modernizes, women tend to have less children because they want to be focused on their education and their career, which is great. Second of all, you have to be in a stable situation. And when you're living in China or Russia or somewhere where the birth rates are much less than that of the United States across time, you can see that it's because they've been politically or economically unstable. So because of that, these women tend to have less children in places like Russia and China, because you don't want to put those children at peril, but also you don't want to have to put yourself at peril because you're not economically prepared to rear these children. It's no coincidence that global birth rates began to decline after the 2008 crisis. Now, with many millennials putting off their child rearing in the US and Europe until later on in life, we see this dip currently, but it's expected to go back up to a roughly 1.8 to 2.2 range in the next decade or so. But there's an expectation that childbirth won't be rising in China at all because of these other factors. Instability is what drives the demographic problems in Russia and China right now, because women just don't want to have children. But that also begs the question, why does the Chinese government at this point limit it to 3 children? I mean, why not just take the reins completely off and say have multiple children? Well, it takes 20 years to grow a functioning adult, and until then, children are technically a drag on the welfare system of an economy, but they're an investment into the future, so it's acceptable. The problem is, as I said in my previous video, China is facing an issue where their elderly population will be 60% of its total population by 2040, and that's 65 and up. 60% of Chinese will be 65 and up by 2040. Children and the elderly generally don't contribute to the economy because they aren't working, and they also require more medical and welfare services. So for China, it really is a you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't situation. China cannot support its massive aging population while also trying to support a massive influx of children. The difference is elderly people have a voice and can stir revolutions, whereas children cannot. So elderly people get to vote more often than not. Basically, it boils down to you get to choose to support your elderly, or you get to choose to support China or not China, you get to support children in China. And with much of the population in China, especially the Chinese government, being elderly, they clearly are going to be choosing the elderly and supporting the elderly rather than supporting and bolstering child rearing so that women are more inclined to have children. They're voting this way much to their peril going forward. In addition, we have something that China doesn't have here in the United States, and that is robust immigration. Whereas the U.S. has roughly 45 million immigrants living in the United States and contributing to our economy, China only has about 1 million immigrants, and that includes people who migrate, quote, migrate from Hong Kong to China. That's just 0.07% of all the people in China are immigrants, meaning China has the fewest share of migrants of any country in the world. By comparison, migrants make up of about 16% of the U.S. population. Interestingly, the U.S. has twice as many Chinese immigrants as China has U.S. immigrants, or even total immigrants at all. 2.2 million Chinese immigrants in the United States, and China in total immigration only has 1 million. Even if they were to open immigration up, not many would go to China because just the opportunities aren't there. They see the writing on the wall when it comes to collapsing situations, the oppression, especially when you see what's going on with the Uyghurs. It's just not somewhere a lot of immigrants want to go. Even so, at this point, it's just too late. They just aren't going to be able to replace hundreds of millions of people with immigrants. And if they were, it would change the fundamental foundation of their country, which Xi Jinping cannot afford at this point. So again, as I said, there's just not anything China can do going forward. This is going to happen and they can't stop it.